Hello and welcome to Bud's RPG Review, where I give my thoughts on role-playing games, card games and board games. Welcome to part 15 of my review of Masks of Nyarlathotep for Call of Cthulhu 7th edition by Chaosium. In this video I'll be covering the grand conclusion, as well as taking a quick tour through Appendices A to D, which are travel, spells, tomes and artefacts, and also giving my final thoughts on the campaign. At this point the investigators may have destroyed Sir Aubrey Penhugh's rocket. However, unless the Eye of Light and Darkness has been placed in the City of the Great Race, the Mountain of the Black Wind and Grey Dragon Island, then the cult will in time just try again. And even if they manage to ward off these three sites, the cult will be constantly on their trail, attempting to find out where the wards are placed. Indeed, if Nitocris is raised, then she makes it her mission to watch them and disrupt their lives whenever possible, eventually taking sweet revenge. Even if one ward has been placed, another blind fool like Roger Carlyle is likely to come along and open the way again. A ward placed on the Red Pyramid will indeed prevent the Black Pharaoh from entering the inner sanctum of the Bent Pyramid. However, to beings who do not even comprehend time in a way that humans do, measuring it in eons versus years, these actions could seem of little consequence. It is worth, however, celebrating what the players have accomplished in saving the world, at least for now, as they deserve it after everything that's happened, because ultimately the ghost of what they have done and who they have sacrificed to do it, as well as the memory of the horrors they have unleashed, will come back to haunt them. In order to properly close the campaign, a method has been provided to calculate just how successful they've been by measuring them against the potential events of the solar eclipse on the 14th of January 1926. First up is America. New York is not a critical site, though if Mdari and his followers are not dealt with, they will gather at the appropriate time and join with the worship of Nyarlathotep and follow the ceremony, taking to the streets and murdering strangers. England is also not a critical site, and there is a possibility that Gavigan or Shafiq may not be leading the chapter of the Brotherhood of the Black Pharaoh, in which case a cultist steps up from the ranks and performs the rites. These will take place either at Misa House or out of the way in a backwater. In Egypt, should the investigators have failed to stop the resurrection of Nitocris, then the Egyptian chapter of the Brotherhood of the Black Pharaoh performs the rites in the catacombs underneath the Sphinx of Giza, summoning the Black Sphinx, though their contribution is minor. If Omar al-Shakti is gone, then Nitocris is in command, and she orders her followers to not take part in the ritual, as it is contrary to her own schemes. The site in Kenya is essential in making the Great Gate permanent, so unless the investigators have taken action, the spawn of Nyarlathotep and Mweru perform the rites at the Mountain of the Black Wind. This ceremony forms one corner of the magical triangle alongside China and Australia, so if Sir Aubrey's rocket is stopped, the gate could still be opened through great effort and many sacrifices, as well as a much longer ritual. The Australian location is another critical one, and unless the investigators have intervened, Houston performs the great ritual at the Purple Dome Temple, which also forms a corner of the Arcane Triangle. If the Kenya rite has been prevented and Sir Aubrey's rocket is destroyed, then this ritual is for nothing. The China location is one of the most important, as Sir Aubrey's rocket is needed to tear a hole in reality, and it is the purpose of the Order of the Bloated Woman to call forth the horrors from elsewhere. If the rocket launch is prevented, and the ritual in Kenya thwarted, then the efforts here are not in vain, as while the Great Gate is not fully opened, some horrors are called through, though where they appear could be the basis for future games. In the end, we really only have an ultimate outcome. There are three outcomes: the horror averted, the lesser horror, and the full horror. Points are assigned to each achievement the investigators accomplish before January the 14th, 1926, and they are denoted chapter by chapter, with bonus points being added for things that they may have missed and deducted for things they've accomplished. It lists each chapter here, along with the points gained or removed based on what they've done. For example, in the Australia chapter, if Houston remains alive and performs the Great Rite, then 6 points are added to the total. But if the Eye of Light and Darkness have been cast upon the City of the Great Race, preventing the use of the Purple Dome Temple, all points for Australia are halved, rounded down. When all the points have been added up, the following descriptions are consulted. If there are 25 points or more, then the full horror is released upon the world. As the sun eclipses the Indian Ocean, onlookers see the flash of light from the rocket and the sea draws back, forming a huge tsunami, and a tear appears in the air filled with the blackness of space and a single pulsing red star. The Great Gate opens and spheres of unearthly light pour through as entities from Formalhaut and Aldebaran are returning. Minions of Cthulhu, Shub-Niggurath and Hasta join those of the Great Old Ones to empower them to their reascension to the throne of Earth. Farms burn, meteorites strike the cities, and the true gods are awoken from their slumber, and the laughter of Nyarlathotep echoes through the black infinity. The light of humanity dims, and those that survive see the world turning greyer every day. If it is 7 to 24 points, it unleashes the lesser horror. As per the full horror, the crack in the sky opens and the single pulsing red star is seen. However, something is not quite right. The rituals were not adequate and the gate pulses with a cosmic radiance and closes. Worldwide, cracks in reality appear and horrors come through. Ghouls burst from the soil of New York graveyards. Dimensional shamblers skulk in the shadows of Shanghai. Deep ones raid the docks in London, and hunting horrors haunt the skies of the Australian outback. Wherever they are, the investigators witness some manifestation, and this may provide the basis for future scenarios. If the points total is less than 6, then we have the horror averted. As the total eclipse of the sun happens, onlookers enjoy the spectacle as the darkness descends, and as the investigators wait with bated breath, the light of the sun returns. The eclipse is over. The investigators have saved the day, for the time being. All investigators are awarded D10 SAN for each place warded with the Eye of Light and Darkness, and their lives are changed forever. Blissful ignorance is no longer an option, but such is the price for the deeds performed for the good of mankind. After this, it talks about extending the campaign, listing another 5 times there is a solar eclipse from 1927 to 1930, and it gives us some suggested investigations, with one around the new Queen and Nitocris's ambitions following the Great Plan. And on this note, the campaign comes to a close. Okay, now we move on to the appendices. I'll give a brief overview of what you have here without going into too much detail, as they are for the most part utilitarian. Appendix A is around travel. It gives us some good information on sea travel at the time, going into journey times, the cost involved, and the general life on a ship, as well as this incredibly handy table that tracks the oceanic travel times from the various important places in days. It talks about the difference between freighters and tramp steamers when compared to actual passenger liners. After that, it moves on to air travel, which was in its infancy in the 1920s. It talks about the journey times and cost as well as life in the air, and gives some good information on pulp airships. We then have rail travel with the same things such as journey times and costs and life on the rails. The next bit deals with recovery and skill improvement while travelling, including SAN being slowly restored should nothing too crazy happen while on board. It gives a list of skills that can be learned on board a ship, as well as how to improve current skills. After this, it goes into travel events, stressing the need for balance and not having anything happen that could overshadow the campaign itself. It gives a few examples of things that could happen on a journey, including one where potential replacement investigators are introduced. After this, we have Appendix B, Spells. We have a selection of spells that are cast by the various characters within the campaign. It includes some spells that are denoted as folk magic, those that are essentially watered down spells passed down usually by word of mouth that can still produce magical effects but are not normally found written in tomes. A particular note here is the spells to activate the Eye of Light and Darkness, which is a powerful ritual requiring 100 points of power to cast. There is the Folk Healing spell and the Time Trap spell, which was used by Robert Houston to pull Kakakatak through space and time to the present. Then we have Appendix 3, not C as expected, which deals with the tomes that are available through each chapter in the book. It starts with Peru with the final confessions of Gaspar Figueroa, then leading on to America with the narcotic manuscripts, Selections de Livre d'Yvonne, Amongst the Stones, Life as a God, and Africa's Dark Sects. England is next with the Equinox de Vese, Book of Daizan, Liber Avonis, and Song of the Djinn, or Ogniat Min al-Jinn. In Egypt, we have a slightly later version of the Al-Azif or Necronomicon and the Black Rites of Louvet Karaf, and this is followed by Kenya with the Black Tome. Australia has Wondrous Intelligence and Robert Houston's Gods of Reality. Lastly, we have China with the Goddess of the Black Fan, Livre d'Yvonne, the Greek version of the Necronomicon, Relay text commentaries, Secret Mysteries of Asia, the all-important 7 cryptical books of Hassan, and finally the Tale of the Priest Kwan and True Magic. Lastly, we move on to Appendix D, Artifacts. Again, as per the tomes, they are divided up by chapter. The first item is the golden mirror found in the Hotel España in Peru, an item that causes those looking into it to be bombarded with visions from various points in the campaign. This is followed by the Ward of the Pyramid, a device used to trap entities imbued with the essence of Nyarlathotep that functions similar to an elder sign. After this we move to America. There is the Mask of Hayama from Juju House, a hideous African tribal mask that bonds itself to the face of the wearer and gives them visions of one of 4 gods rolled on this table. They could be fortunate enough to get Nodens, but Azathoth, Shub-Niggurath and Yog-Sothoth are an entirely different prospect. In England we have the Mirror of Gal, a scrying device that can also be used to attack opponents and cause physical damage remotely. There are the two sceptres that when crossed in front of the body add 2d10 magic points to the holder's pool while they remain crossed. There is the Headdress of Eyes, an item created by Edward Gavigan and blessed by Nyarlathotep that can store magic points. In Egypt we have the indestructible adornments of Nitocris, the crown, girdle and necklace, that are used to resurrect her. There's the Amulet of Night Beasts that protects the wearer from hunting horrors, the Circlet of Natahage that can be used to conjure cobras for magic points that don't attack the wearer, and that can be made huge and dangerous the more points that are pumped into it. There's the Token of Bastragard, a black granite pendant carved into the form of an Egyptian cat. It guarantees that all felines are friendly towards the wearer and protects them from cat demons. We then move to Kenya, where we have Tarn's Ring, that is a magic point store that can leech them from a dying person, Bundari's Fly Whisk, which gives a much needed protection against evil and allows the user to find hidden evil, and then finally in Australia, we have the device of rods, wheels and mirrors that is used to allow a member of the great race to transfer its mind into a human. When I started this series of videos back in March of 2019, I had no idea what was ahead of me. I played Masks using the Call of Cthulhu 2nd edition rules many years ago, so remembered parts of it, but as a campaign it has evolved into so much more since then. Firstly, let's talk about the presentation. You'd be fairly hard pushed to find a slipcase set as caringly put together as this one. This is evident in the obvious care that has been taken with the handout and the fact that they give you a keeper screen just to use with this campaign. Spreading it across two beautifully put together hardback books was an inspired decision and one worthy of the pedigree of what they contain. Additionally, the art is just excellent throughout, with many of the big scenes illustrated to perfection. If I had one complaint, it would be that we only had a tiny glimpse of Sir Aubrey's rocket in the background of one of the pieces. Okay, so let's talk about the chapters themselves. The introduction as to what could potentially happen during the course of events is big enough to fill a keeper with excitement, but not so big as to be intimidating. Also, introducing all of the main players in the initial dramatis personae was a great editorial decision. Perhaps the most contentious chapter of all is the Peru one. The idea that you actually get to know Jackson Elias and he eventually becomes a good friend is frankly something that the previous incarnations were missing all along without it being glaringly obvious. When I originally played it back in the day, we literally had a photocopied piece of paper that said, "What you know about your friend Jackson Elias," and that was it. There was no in-game connection to him whatsoever beyond this few short paragraphs. But the Peru chapter goes a long way to erasing that disconnect and making him a living, breathing person that the investigators will genuinely mourn the passing of. The New York chapter has been expanded to include a new section in Harlem, which never feels like it intrudes on the main narrative. It feels about right. Juju House is every bit the horror show it's supposed to be, and the brutal murder in room 410 of Jackson Elias was still capable of provoking a reaction from me all of these years later. The London chapter didn't feel that much different from when I originally played it, and Edward Gavigan is still a slick, smug, wealthy psychopath that he always has been, and the campaign is better for it. The Penhew Foundation and Mesa House feel as creepy as ever, while still remaining fresh. Egypt feels like quite a long and involved chapter, and at times I got a bit mixed up with the pyramids and who and what was appearing where, but it's such a well thought out piece that it can be forgiven. Africa was one of the best parts of the campaign for me, and the culmination of Nyarlathotep appearing in its bloody tongue form astride the Mountain of the Black Wind is peak Call of Cthulhu, and finding a powerful ally in old Bundari gives that glimmer of hope that the campaign needs, as it feels like everything and everyone is against them. Australia being a chapter that was added in Terra Australis and subsequently made a canon part of the campaign in the complete edition feels like it has always been there, and also comes across as a very difficult section, with the surprise of a member of the great race being willing to help the investigators in exchange for freedom being something that can give the investigators the edge that they need and fill in many of the blanks that the campaign may have thrown at them at this point. The final chapter in China feels overly long at times too, though finally meeting Jack Brady is a big payoff here, and obtaining a way toward the various sites with the Isle of Light and Darkness is a boost that the investigators would undoubtedly need at this point in the campaign. The launch of Sir Aubrey's rocket to burn the sky has so many variables that I think it could be difficult to keep track of at times, but the narrative reward is immense. I do however feel like an extra scene with Robert Carlyle in the sanitarium would have benefited the chapter. The 7th edition version of Masks of Nyarlathotep is going to be hard to beat. not only by Chaosium themselves, but by pretty much anybody wanting to create a campaign even approaching this stature, as the 37 years of writing and refinement it has behind it set it, quite frankly, on another level from other campaigns. At times it does teeter on the edge of becoming its own bloated woman fit to burst, as it is packed with so much information and detail, but it manages to maintain its focus in the face of this. When people say that not only is Masks of Nyarlathotep the greatest Call of Cthulhu campaign, but pretty much the best campaign ever written for any system, they're probably right. The word masterpiece is thrown around far too often and undeservedly these days, but it is a word I would reserve for this. In every way, Masks excels in producing something thought-provoking, dramatic, terrifying, and frankly epic. The bad guys are just bad, wherever in the world they're from, and the message of power corrupting and the promise of absolute power making a person do frankly ungodly things is one that is evident throughout. It would be remiss of anybody who is a fan of Call of Cthulhu to not visit this campaign at some point, even if just to learn how things are supposed to be done. For the price, you get not only a beautiful slipcase set to sit on your shelves, but potentially years worth of gameplay of the highest quality. Masks of Nyarlathotep is without doubt the easiest 10 out of 10 I've ever given. If you enjoyed this review, please make sure to hit the thumbs up, subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos. Also, if you're interested in buying this product, I'll put some links below. Lastly, if you like what I produce here, then maybe think about supporting me on Patreon or even becoming a member of my YouTube channel. Bud out.